Terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIL aren't suddenly going to stop plotting against us at midnight tomorrow. And we shouldn't surrender the tools that help keep us safe. It would be irresponsible. It would be reckless. We shouldn't allow it to happen.
President Obama, in his weekly address, urging Congress to pass compromise legislation to keep the NSA's domestic surveillance program going. And we're back now with the panel. Well, Britt, not only has Rand Paul promised to force the expiration, his words, of the bulk data collection, at least for a few days, through parliamentary maneuvers, this week he also blamed the creation of ISIS on Republicans. Take a look.
ISIS exists and grew stronger because of the hawks in our party who gave arms indiscriminately, and most of those arms were snatched up by ISIS. These hawks also wanted to bomb Assad, which would have made ISIS's job even easier. They created these people.
What do you make of Senator Paul's actions and words, both on the merits of the arguments that he makes and also as a strategy to win the Republican presidential nomination?
Taking the second part of your question first, he seems confused about which party he's running in. These stances, either on surveillance or on who's responsible for ISIS, are not going to sit well with, the majority of the Republican electorate. It's just not going to happen. There is a segment of the Republican electorate which shares his somewhat paranoid views of things, and he will have their support, but that's not a nominating set. And as for the historical accuracy of his idea of who created ISIS, first of all, Assad and ISIS weren't really fighting each other. They basically split the country up, and only recently has ISIS taken any territory that Assad controlled. So that's nonsense. He makes no mention of the fact that after that there was a stable Iraq in place, a relatively stable Iraq, which Obama walked away from, which gave ISIS the free reign that it's had, or at least was largely responsible for doing so. So historically, he's off base there as well.
George, I have long felt that Senator Paul is one of the few original thinkers in this town. I've long felt you were one of the few original thinkers in this town. So I have a question. Could you explain to me what he's up to here?
He's up to two things, and the roles are in tension. First, I credit him with conscientiousness. He's a libertarian who really feels that the collection of metadata violates the Fourth Amendment prescription of unreasonable searches and seizures. So let's credit him. But he's simultaneously a presidential candidate. And as Brett says, he's a niche candidate of a shrinking niche, because events are not playing out the way he anticipated 2 years ago when he began running for president. The world looks much more dangerous than it did. And today, last night, his campaign sends out an ad saying, "Watch for my NSA spying showdown with Barack Obama." And again, "Get ready, America, for the biggest brawl for liberty of the century." The problem with literally cashing in, this is a fundraising device, is that it muddies the water and it makes people doubt which I'm prepared to credit him with, the complete sincerity of the man. With all the talk about how Washington doesn't work, we have no bipartisanship anymore, the USA Freedom Act passed the House 338 to 88. Now that's just an overwhelming law to set up the protection of this metadata that has to be accessed through the FISA court. Now granted, the FISA court almost always grants requests for surveillance, but still there is a court there. So I do think that at this point he looks somewhat quixotic.
But let's, go ahead. But we are where we are in part because of the expiration of this, because the Senate didn't pass a bill, didn't really take up this issue in time. So, I think the challenge here is we did get this bipartisan vote, but Mitch McConnell hasn't wanted to take up the USA Freedom Act. He's capitulating at the last minute because he faces this deadline. But
in fairness, he was working on the president's trade authority.
Sure, but he could have taken the president raised the Patriot Act extension a year ago. He could have taken it up 2 months ago. We have a Republican Congress that is battling each other on passing the Patriot Act. It is a big question of why we're facing that.
Well, I'm going to pick up on that, though, Julie, because we played the clip at the top of the segment of President Obama talking in his weekly radio address about the dangers of letting this program go dark. He also talked about it briefly on Friday, but I have to say what strikes me is how tepid he has been in his support of this. Is his heart really in pushing for extension of this program, which he has long expressed doubts about?
Well, it especially looks tepid when you compare it to what he's been doing on trade, which is one of his top priorities right now. He has been making phone calls to the Hill. He's been out talking about it around the country publicly. This has been a much more cautious and, as you say, tepid PR strategy by the White House. They do want this renewed. They do think that the bill that the House passed is a compromise in having the telephone companies keep the data as opposed to the government keeping it. But this is just inherently an uncomfortable issue for the president. When you look at things that he said when he was running as a candidate and then the programs that he kept in place when he became president, it doesn't sit well. It's not something that he really feels comfortable with.
It's hard for this president to put on his big boy pants and deal with national security.
No, it's not.
That's
What
the
is that? I mean, the issue here is is a fight between Republicans. Do you think the president's lobbying the Senate is going to make Rand Paul come to the table? We thought that was Mitch McConnell's job, I thought. But he hasn't been able to get his conference to an issue here because that's why we're facing this deadline,
There will be a
isn't it?
vote on the House-passed bill. I don't think there's much doubt about that. McConnell was trying to give
Before
the
or
president
after
all
the
the
deadline?
authority that he had before, not just some of it.
But he had a House problem because 200 Republicans voted against McConnell's position.
I get that, but that does not mean, Neera, that the president has been on this issue and many others an effective advocate with Congress. He simply hasn't been.
Yes, I thought-
And when it comes to these issues, which, as Julie points out, are a little out of phase with the way he campaigned, he's not very good at it.
It's funny to blame him for the fact that Mitch McConnell cannot
I'm
get
not
this bill
blaming him
passed.
for that.
Okay, I thought you were. Sorry.
Okay. You two finished? Because I want to ask about something else.
Sure.
And that is ISIS. And this split inside the Democratic Party. The Center for a New American Security, a liberal foreign policy think tank, came out with a series of essays, of points this week, which were very critical of the way President Obama is conducting the war against ISIS. They called it failing. They said he needs to find a new course. How big a split is there inside the Democratic Party? And what are the chances that Hillary Clinton is going to end up criticizing Obama as being too soft on fighting ISIS?
You know, Hillary actually talked about this last week and talked about the challenge we're facing with the Iraqi army. You know, conservatives often tell us you can't help people who can't help themselves. We have a big challenge right now. It is a serious challenge, which is the Iraqi army does not seem to be fighting for itself. That was a big challenge we've had over the last few weeks. We have to deal with that. That is a serious substantive.
Does Hillary Clinton, and you are close to the campaign, feel that Obama is doing enough or that he should do more?
You know, in her own words, she has said that the president has the right strategy. And so, you know, that doesn't mean things won't change in the future, but right now we do not need more boots on the ground. We do not need more American boots on the ground. She said that very clearly.
I don't know where she said anything very clearly.
She was in New Hampshire. She did an event in New Hampshire. It was one of the times that she did take questions, and she got asked about
You
this.
mean where there's a rope line and
There's a
people are
rope
shouting
line,
questions and she gives a
No.
10-second answer and then walks
she
away?
She was asked by, I think, Robert Costa of the Washington Post this question. She answered it. Well, make sure you get those ahead of time.
Well, I'd appreciate that because I would like her to hold a real news conference or sit down for an interview and discuss these. And can you tell me where she is on trade?
On trade, she's talked about she wants to see the specifics of the Trans-Pacific
But didn't she say, as Secretary of State, this was the gold standard for trade deals?
You know, was the trade deal finished when she was Secretary of State 2.5 years ago?
So she needs more detail. Okay. Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday.